Welcome to The Value Shot. I'm Jeffrey D. Brown, publisher and editor of Guitar Business World. Now, these 16 original episodes were featured at the back of the show on Guitar Business Radio, where I talked about some basic foundational building blocks that you can use to help drive your business or career to the next level. Those segments have now been edited and repackaged for presentation here on GBW. They're short and full of simple but really powerful ideas you can put to use right now. I suggest listening to them in sequence to get the most out of them. So let's get to it. Now I want to cover a few areas today, and remember, all of this is related in one way or another. So if you want to have all the context and you haven't already done so, go back and listen from episode 1. That's another reason why we made these short segments available by themselves. Now, most of what I've been talking about in the value shot so far may seem very general to some of you, and that's one way of looking at it. But as I've said many times, I think of it as foundational. It's the stuff you build your business or your personal life, in some cases, on top of. These are reference points that you call up on a regular basis to help with decision-making, problem-solving, and generally having better results with more positive outcomes. What I'm not doing is giving you information on how to build your product better or perform your particular service more efficiently. You already know how to do that, or something within or available to you does, and you just have to unlock it and reveal it. More importantly, what I can do for you here is give you basic tools and ideas that you can use to facilitate that process. You know the old story about offering someone a fish and you feed them for a day, teach them to fish, and you feed them for a lifetime? Well, that's kind of the model here. Now, in our business at Guitar PR, we do go a lot deeper into specific situations and apply those same principles for our clients and their particular objectives. But you can use these methods yourself. And if you've been following along, you've heard me talk a lot about the 3 C's. That's our simple checkbox formula for dealing with any marketing or sales-related activity. And again, just to review, the 3 C's are capture the attention, convey the message, and compel the action. So I want to go a bit further on a couple of points today on how we actually implement the formula. Now, I've always given this to you in the order in which the process typically executes, starting with capture the attention or top down. And I'm talking about when the activity is presented to the market in finished form, whatever that is. But most of the time when we're doing the planning or creative work on this stuff, we're working in reverse order or bottom up. We start with what action do we want to compel? But now let me add another piece into the equation, and that is we can equate action in some cases with a different term, and that is result or results. There can be a distinction between action and results where the action contributes to or facilitates results. When we're working in the development stage, we may be asking what result or what results do we want to achieve, and then with that understanding, what action or actions will be required to make that happen. So, continuing to work in reverse, we then ask what message or messages are likely to compel the action needed to achieve the result. And finally, all the way back up to the top, how can we best capture the attention that will allow us to properly convey the message? Remember, this is a formula or a framework of sorts to work from, and it's universal in nature, so it works across the board. And because it's very simple, it's easy to implement. But that does not mean, however, that it automatically generates the answers to the questions you'll come up against in the process. That may take some work and some trial and error, which remember is R&D. Nonetheless, it will make your overall job easier and improve your odds of success. Now on to something else. How many times has somebody offered you some constructive criticism? It's usually a cringeworthy offer at best. And when it was delivered, did you wonder what happened to the constructive part? Did you think the word constructive should imply a positive aspect, only to find out that it was a phony and deceptive offer? And by the way, did this come from a friend, a family member, or a coworker of some kind who pretended only to have your best interest in mind? Well, yes is the common answer. And my view of constructive criticism is that it's an oxymoron. There's really nothing constructive about criticism. And I know I'm going to get some pushback on this, but here's how I look at it. Criticism as such is basically a negative thing. Negativity always breeds more negativity in one form or another. Even if you think you're helping someone by offering the big CC, you can't expect to project negativity and get positive results in return. Of course, let's face it, so-called constructive criticism is not always offered for seemingly, and by the way, erroneous positive results. It's often done from an internal negative emotion about someone else, and the criticism is just a vehicle to express that. Adding the word constructive is often an attempt to hide the real feeling, unfortunately. Now, I've come up with a criticism classification system, and yep, you guessed it, there are 3 categories of criticism. They are opportunistic, competitive, and vindictive. Now, these are my arbitrary categories. I don't know if anyone else has used these particular ones, but I do imagine there are others. And I see the first 2 as similar, where opportunistic is typically seen in personal relationships and competitive is primarily in business situations. The similarity revolves around the idea that there is something to be gained with the criticism, like an advantage or superiority, control, etc. The third category, vindictive criticism, is the worst kind. Not that any of them is particularly good, but you've all seen examples of this, right? And generally, this has nothing to do with the person at the other end of the criticism. The critic is typically experiencing a life disorder of some magnitude, and somehow criticizing others makes them feel better for just a few fleeting moments, I'm afraid. So what's the alternative? Simple, a more positive approach. In lieu of harsh, direct criticism, suggest alternatives for a better outcome. Point out the typical negative results that may come about with particular activities or behaviors, if need be. But that ought to be it. And by the way, there's no political bent here. I'm not encouraging participation trophies or anything like that. It's just a better way to handle it. And when you're offered constructive criticism, well, here's what I routinely do. If someone asks me, can I give you some constructive criticism? I respond immediately with, no, but I'm occasionally interested in hearing other opinions. Now that will usually stop them in their tracks or cause them to rethink their strategy. Now in the next Value Shot in episode 8, I'll talk more about competitive criticism and how to deal with that. And finally, when was the last time you said or heard someone say to another or you, I disagree, or I completely disagree? And they said that with a tone that most certainly implies, you're wrong and I'm right. You're an idiot and I'm smart. Sound familiar? Well, some years ago, this idea was pointed out to me by someone I greatly respect because I was doing just that. I had never realized what a terribly negative and thoughtless thing that was to say. He suggested that a much better approach was to simply say something along the lines of, essentially, I have a different opinion or view. Or, I think I understand what you're saying, but I see things differently. Can you see how that slight adjustment in your language could change the course of the conversation? Unless, of course, your underlying motivation is actually to be critical. Well, I can tell you in all honesty, since that day, I have not uttered the words, I disagree, to anyone. So I guess I'm just being the change I want to see, and maybe a few of you might think twice the next time you feel the urge to say those words yourself. And as always, stay positive, stay focused on the destination, and keep all your options open on how you're going to get there. Well, I hope you got some value from that, but I do want to emphasize again the need to listen in sequence. And just so you know, there are brand new episodes of The Value Shot on the way, so be sure you're subscribed to Guitar Business World here on Substack to get those, as well as new editorial features and valuable resources. As always, we love to hear from you with questions or thoughts. You can contact us directly at guitarbusiness@substack.com. guitarbusiness@substack.com. I'm Jeffrey D. Brown. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.